Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Julia Becker with the content marketing team here at FreightWaves. We're happy to present today's webinar in partnership with Locomation. Today we'll be discussing how Locomation's human-guided approach to autonomy builds capacity and cuts costs, all while reducing emissions and complying with regulations. I'll be joined by Locomation's co-founder and CEO, Chetan Madechli, and Finch Fulton, Vice President of Policy and Strategy. FreightWaves' own Chief Economist, Anthony Smith, is also joining us as MC and host of our chat. We'll have a live Q&A with all speakers following our discussion. But before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of quick items. If you have any issues during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team via the audience chat function in your webinar console, and someone will be in touch to assist you. If you have questions that you'd like to ask our presenters, you may enter those at any time during the Q&A box in your console, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of our presentation. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow using the email that you registered with if you'd like to share it on demand with your colleagues. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Anthony to kick off today's discussion. It's great to have you here today, Anthony.
Awesome, Julia. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm excited for this one. So we're here with Locomation, Chetan, and Finch, and I'm excited to have you two here because I've chatted with both of you in individual videos, but I'm glad to have you both here when we're looking at Locomation. For those, Chetan, let's just jump into it. For those that might not be familiar, can you give us a quick background on what Locomation is and what you're aiming to do or the problem that you're aiming to solve within the industry?
Let me start with the name Locomation. Our name actually encompasses our longer term vision. It is a mashup of the words locomotion and automation. And our ultimate goal is to bring automation to anything that moves, as long as it makes business sense, of course. So myself and my four other co-founders, five of us, we started Locomation in 2018 out of Carnegie Mellon's National Robotics Engineering Center and brought in trucking industry leaders, supply chain leaders, automotive leaders, policy leaders with deep knowledge and experience in every aspect of our business. And we are growing very, very fast, and we are working with our customers today. We have multiple customers. We just announced our third customer. We are very delighted to have Christensen Transportation in our family, along with Wilson Logistics and PGT Trucking we've announced earlier on. We strive to alleviate the freight system's chronic pain points. And we are always interested in painkillers more than vitamins. And when it comes to the freight system, the pain points lie around supply chain capacity tightness. There's always more demand for capacity. There's driver shortages, which effectively reduces your supply and also does not help with the capacity problem. And high greenhouse gas emissions. Road transport accounts for a substantial portion of the greenhouse gas emissions, and heavy duty trucks are also responsible for a larger portion of that. As part of our approach, we work with carriers in the near term to optimize their operating systems to get their trucks running 20 plus hours per day using a hub-to-hub relay model. And this optimization process is beneficial for them right away, and we project it will significantly increase their capacity and profits as we continue to integrate our autonomous technology into their networks. And this pre-optimization phase delivers upfront value while it lays the groundwork for us to begin deploying our autonomous relay convoy system starting next year. Locomation began by looking to leverage our technology and expertise to solve the use case with the biggest needs. We are always more interested in finding that biggest pain point and tripling down on it with a rational, realizable, yet audacious and ambitious technology goal. So we, despite coming from technology backgrounds, we are never operating with the mindset that let's build the technology hammer first and then look for nails. We always do the opposite. We go where the needs are, where the business opportunities are. It was very apparent to us that trucking is in deep needs for a technology to come and help addressing the capacity problem, driver shortage problem, and greenhouse gas emissions problem. So that's what we are doing. We have a very mindful, interleaved business and technology roadmap that enables us to launch earlier, scale faster, and move towards larger and larger responsibilities for the technology and wider deployment cases as quickly as we possibly can. And lastly, you cannot do that alone. This takes a team, a large team of very experienced individuals to pull this off. So we are obsessively focusing on building a world-class, passionate, and deeply experienced multidisciplinary team to relentlessly execute our plan.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for that overview, and I think you really hit on a lot of great, insightful points. I mean, when you look at that first aspect of hitting on the efficiency component of it, and really being able to utilize your hub model, and I'm excited to jump into it because we know when I first heard about all this stuff, it's just like, yeah, that makes sense. So I'm excited about this. But can you talk about that secret sauce? What makes Locomation stand out? Because when we look at the industry, companies have been trying to deliver this technology for some time. When you're looking at automation, autonomous vehicles, and we've heard companies talking about how they're on the cusp of full driverless 3, 5, maybe even longer, maybe 10 years ago. But we're still seeing that there's testing going on, running pilots, still operating at level 2. So can you talk to what makes Locomation stand out at this point?
Yeah. Excellent question, and I'm happy to. So myself and my co-founders, we are very fortunate because we've spent a lot of time in basic science, we've spent a lot of time in applied engineering, and we spend a lot of time now with Locomation in deep business. So basically 5 years ago, when we were looking to start Locomation, we looked into our crystal balls powered by our past experience of decades, and we foresaw that the efforts to go for like fully autonomous, completely driverless for robotaxis or for trucks at SAE levels 4 and 5, it is still pretty much an open research problem that with no safe and reliable solution at site. So we couldn't see a practical path to actually go down for starting with solo driverless in one shot and make sure that we deliver a product within a reasonable time frame. So one of my favorite examples for that, it reminds me of the underpants gnomes of on South Park. So they have a very interesting business model. Step 1, we steal underpants from everyone's laundry. Step 2, there are a bunch of question marks there. And then step 3, make profits. So it feels like that the AV industry for the past decade or so has been in that step 2. There is some question marks, some hand waving, some maybe wishful thinking that somehow the technology piece will be figured out, the regulatory piece will be figured out, the business model viability piece will be figured out, and everybody will make enormous amount of profits. So that sounds like a great idea, but we didn't see it happening in practice. That's why we, from day 0, we crafted not just the longer-term ambitions of Locomation, but an almost step-by-step plan of where to start, how to execute, and how to get there. That foresight, combined with our past experience and what we observed in the AV landscape, as this is what's happening, gave us that, if you call it superpower, to make a few fundamental decisions in the right way very early on. And that's what we benefited from significantly, and we continue to benefit from it.
I love that reference to South Park because I think it's very fitting. I mean, with this industry and so many others of like, all right, this is the first step, and then there's this question mark, and then the cash is just going to flow in. I mean, but I love the aspect that that you have a roadmap that you're building out, and you have a process that's put in place right now. So I've heard about some of the phenomenal results, and I want to hear you kind of just dive into that a little bit more on, the 1-2 punch that you have that's right now that's helping to boost the capacity, the customer capacity for your clients right now.
Yeah, exactly. So let me very briefly visit the earlier points. So most of our most of the other companies operating in the field and now working on autonomous trucks, they all are built around this original idea of solving solo driverless for complicated urban environments. And that playbook, technology playbook, is pretty much the same across all of them. So we call them AV tracking 1.0. It's kind of an archaic view on the technology. And with our, again, unique visibility across the spectrum of all the elements in the business and our deep expertise in having done this many times before, we are now bringing, we see ourselves at the vanguard of AV tracking 2.0. And this is a different approach, better technology, more practical, more near-term value without giving up the bigger upside in the future. And that seems like it's in conflict, but we found a way of making this work. So you can have your cake and eat it too.
Love to hear it. And also, can't forget, we also have Finch here with us as well. Finch, let's bring you into the conversation as well. I mean, when we're looking at all this, the great things that's happening at Locomation, one of the things that also is a great byproduct of it is that efficiency. And we're talking, GHG, greenhouse gas emissions. Can you jump into some of those talking points as to how that's really been impactful in that area as well?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to. Well, to put it simply, in order to get the benefits that you'd want, it takes three things to make an autonomous trucking route work. One is the trucks, our human-led two-truck linked convoys that are legal and capable of being safely deployed today in commerce. Two, you need to understand where it makes sense to automate. This is what Chetan was talking about. Don't leave it up to question marks to figure it out. You optimize the routes where there's money to be made, where carriers have enough cargo going back and forth and shippers want to optimize that. That way you can actually squeeze the efficiencies out of that route using those trucks. You can do it today with conventionally driven trucks, but it adds exponentially when you make those autonomous relay convoy trucks. And then third, of course, is the back-end organization, that digital transportation service system that allows you to take the carrier's cargo and match it up so that you can have two trucks that are going to the same place at the same time that are set up to optimize that. You can get the truck drivers to their end destination and back home every night. By taking all these things and combining them, you can start also driving in greater efficiencies in the system as well. You're reducing the deadhead miles where you're forcing drivers who are spending 16% of their time driving just to go pick up loads, not making any money because they're not actually hauling cargo. They're just burning gas. You reduce the idling time because they're not stuck in a Texas summer or a Michigan winter running their heater and AC because we've organized that route to get them home to their families every night. When you start adding these things up, not of least of which is the actual aerodynamic efficiencies of lining up two trucks that travel closely, you start to see these dramatic impacts. We had an independent third-party scientifically based review done of our approach that actually came back and said, you're undercounting your benefits. You actually get a 22% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and a 21% reduction in fuel consumptions, which is great. I mean, we knew we were being a little conservative, but we didn't realize when you put all things together how much it matters. And it matters a lot. It doesn't just matter to us, and it's great. It's a great policy outcome. There's no more important time than today to be focusing on greenhouse gas reductions, but carriers care about this, and carriers care that shippers really care about this, right? Shippers have been putting a lot of attention and a lot of focus on reducing their greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation of their goods, right? Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, some of these major companies, their CEO's pay is tagged to their reduction of their greenhouse gas footprint. So everybody that works for that CEO knows they need to find carriers that can reduce their greenhouse gas footprint so that their boss can be happy. So carriers that incorporate our technology provide those benefits to the shippers, and so they become the most popular kid in the room, right? And this is also important when you look at the investor point of view, right? When you're looking at these major institutional investors that now hold about a fifth and vote for a fourth of the S&P 500, your Vanguard, your BlackRock, your State Street, these index funds, they're starting to see a tipping point, right? To where they have to drive the investments as a whole into these beneficial investments, these portfolio approaches. So they're investing in companies that can show that they have a solution to the reduction of greenhouse gases. They're taking this head on. And, by making all these carbon neutrality pledges and pledges to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint, they're able to invest in these companies that are doing that. So shippers not only want to prove this, and it's not just about the CEO, the overall health in the future of these shippers is tied to their ability to prove that they're reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, not just, wishy-washy, like, yeah, we feel like we're really giving it our best. They have to prove it, and we're helping them do that. And you have to have these third-party audits of your approaches be done so that you can help them prove what they need to do to make the shippers happy, to make the investors happy, and to have all the outcomes that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a great overview. And I mean, that efficiency, I think, is something that's so overlooked, especially in this industry. And so, Finch, I also did a little bit of digging as well. And I think this is a great subject to dive into, ARC. Can you talk about ARC a little bit and what that is and expand upon that a little bit more?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but really when you're looking at the ecosystem of today, right? Trucks are generally utilized about a third of the time, as you know. And this is the most expensive asset that most carriers have, right? It's the trucks and the labor. If the trucks are sitting there only, a third of the time being used, there's a dramatic underutilization. And the truck drivers are often stuck waiting for loads. Obviously they're only allowed to drive for 11 hours a day for safety reasons. But when you start to take today's technology and you line up what it means to be able to use a truck 1,000 miles a day, about 22 hours a day, have those drivers, you combine the driving time of 2 human drivers, you optimize that route so they're driving for the majority of the time, and then you have last mile delivery handled by other drivers, you're able to squeeze out dramatic efficiencies from the system before you look at a future where you'd remove the human driver. And it's not by creating something new or adding things in, it's about better utilization of the assets you have today. And when you do that, you start getting the benefit of carrying twice the loads, twice as far, twice as fast, generating twice the revenue. And again, you're keeping your drivers happy because they get home and see their families every night. So they're not stuck out on the road for 15, 20 days at a time. They're not lonely, they're not depressed. And they're generating more money, generating more revenue. So they're bringing more money home. They're not wasting their time with loads, waiting for loads with shippers. They're not wasting their time driving other areas. The autonomous relay convoy approach is the way that you can bring this technology in today and start seeing those benefits, whether you're looking at 2 human drivers and 2 automated driving systems going 1,000 miles a day, or 1 human driver with 2 trucks that is going 500 miles a day, but still generating twice the loads, twice the revenues. It's all about organizing these routes better and taking these different technologies and combining them into a package that really drives the efficiencies, not boiling the ocean like Chetan said, but finding the place and time to use this technology to get those efficiencies, to drive those outcomes we've been talking about. The time is now, even before you can fully remove the driver. And so it's just really about bringing these pieces together and making it work for companies like Wilson, PGT, and Christensen Trucking. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. And I think there's another aspect that I think so many times gets overlooked, and it's that driver perspective. I mean, when you look at what this means, like you said, being able to get home, back to their families, I mean, this has to really kind of be beneficial to retention. And I know when you look at this industry, that's just always been a huge factor. I know for carriers, for a lot of different operators, we're looking at retention turnover in the 90% range. And that's just, par for the course. We're looking at something like this that would really help bring a little bit of quality of life to those drivers. That has to help out a lot. I mean, kind of shifting gears here a little bit, can we talk about some of the corporate compliance issues in light of the recent developments in Washington and how that's really going to impact the industry right now?
Yeah, so obviously corporate compliance is everybody's favorite subject. But as we talk about the idea of being able to prove a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, right, this is just going to grow more and more importance, both in the near term for what we can capture today and over time, especially with this administration. We've already seen an increased focus on greenhouse gas reductions. We know they're increasing fuel standards in 2027 and again in 2030, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to reach those markers unless you're bringing in today's technology and you're able to prove it, right? And so for both looking at regulations with NHTSA, with EPA on fuel economy, and also looking at the regulations around investments with the SEC, right? We touched briefly on greenhouse gas greenwashing, right? Where companies claim to be doing more because they feel like their approach probably can reduce it by 13%, or, they kind of feel like they're probably going to get these benefits, so go ahead and work with them. You have to prove it. And SEC is moving forward with rules that you provide to investors so they can prove it, that's auditable and that is science-based and that is not just feelings. It's not just pledges of something in the future. It's about proving it today and proving it on paper so they can base investments on it. So we're not just talking about, voluntarily submitted things. We're talking about hard and fast rules at the SEC. You've seen every week, you're seeing how they're advancing these rulemakings and bringing them forward to standardized reporting on greenhouse gas reduction efforts so that they can track, what's called scope 3 emissions, or the emissions from the transportation of your goods. I mean, this is critical. So it's critical to be able to prove this for the efficiency of the vehicles and the efficiency of the operations, the operational efficiency, but also for the ability to make investment decisions based on this. So we're proud to be the first autonomous trucking company to get our claims verified by a third party. Again, we were being too conservative, but we invite everybody. If you're going to be talking about this, get your claims validated. One, so that we all know that you're legitimate and it's not just, some policy guy like me using their prettiest words, but so that we can validate it. And ultimately, it's good for the entire industry to be able to show how you can incorporate these advanced vehicle technologies to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint, as the entire trucking industry sees to do a better job of, reducing pollution in the world and driving the efficiency of their systems. Because, by the way, typically fuel efficiency or greenhouse gas reductions equals fuel efficiency. So you're spending less money on gas. So even if you didn't care about the policy outcomes for some reason, you probably do care about your bottom line in the reduction of fuel burn. So it's nice when doing good does good for the world. This is a place where it all lines up.
It definitely. I mean, and I think another area I think we're going to dive into is talking about that I'm really kind of excited to jump into this one, is on being able to legally deploy. But first, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So Finch, Chetan, either one of you can just jump in here, but really kind of take me through that first step. So say we're signed up with Locomation. What's that first step to really kind of remodel my system to make sure that I am really going to be able to run efficient? Because when I hear of some of that runtime in the hub model, I don't know. That's definitely one of those areas that I get excited about, because we talk about all these things that is kind of wishy-washy, hasn't happened yet. But what's that first step that a lot of folks can take with you?
Who goes? Finch, do you take it or do I take it?
This is your boss.
Okay, I'll take it. So what we do is everything we do is data driven, and we start by looking at what is actually happening today. If you will, taking an X-ray of the snapshot of today, how you are operating. Where are you operating? What kind of load density you have? What is your backhaul statistics? That we basically look at every single thing that you are doing under NDA, of course. That is the very intimate part of it. And then we identify parts where we think Locomation's technology can have the most impact. And then we go on to quantify what is that actual applicability today with the amount of business you are carrying out day to day today. If you were to operate, if you were to change your operating model with digital transportation system and instill all the efficiency elements that we will recommend and guide you through, this is what the difference you will see. On top of that, if you go on and deploy Locomation's autonomous human-guided convoy systems, this is the further improvements you will get. This is your profit margins today. This is your profit margins tomorrow. And also, since our system basically squeezes out way more capacity from your assets today, that opens up the marketplace for you. So this is your market share on the routes that you are operating today. With this new operating metrics, you are all of a sudden the most profitable and least costly carrier there. So, and the one with the ample capacity. So you can go and expand your business. So that's the 1-2 punch part of it. The 1 punch part of it is that our system makes your operations way more efficient and hence lower cost to operate. The 2 punch is that you also get to expand your business faster than you could otherwise. So we don't just come in and say that, hey, our system saves 20% of fuel and this much of labor. It's not these canned things. we basically give you another X-ray of your future self so that you can look at it and see how it could be. That is a very powerful thing to witness.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're going to get into some of those more data aspects, because that's one of the areas I love about Locomation, that it is data driven. I mean, we have that industry experience within in the house, but when you're looking at that data driven aspect of it, that really all ties it together as well. So maybe I don't know, Chetan, you or Finch can really kind of talk to this one, but when we're talking about Locomation's approach to human guided autonomy, and this has really been an advantage in the comparison to the industry. How does it become an advantage when it comes to the legality of being able to deploy overall?
Yeah, I can take that one. Thanks, boss. So, I mean, the good news is, and it's not really by mistake, in the near term, we don't need the federal government to take any actions. We can safely, legally, and routinely deploy in commercial operations at scale across the United States. Nobody else can. And it's because we fundamentally built our approach to incorporate human and autonomy together, the human guided autonomy approach. And so because we have a trained CDL certified human driver in control of the convoy at all times, we can handle any on-road situations that pop up. So as you probably know, the US DOT, back when I was there, we certified that the driver of a commercial motor vehicle could be a human or a machine, but there are still rules about the safe operations of a commercial motor vehicle that a human with the CDL is required to do. So if somebody hits you on the road and you've been driving your truck perfectly right, somebody else hits you, you have 10 minutes to lay out warning markers at 4 and 40 paces around the truck, which should tell you how old that regulation is. And it's different if you're near a hill, if you're on a curb, depending on the type of road. So you have to have a human that can look up and understand the situation and put out those markers and pick them up when they're done. You have to do that in 10 minutes. On a 1,000-mile route, if you don't have a human driver present, you can't handle that. And there's no industry solution to this today. So no one else can deploy without a human driver. It doesn't matter what technology they're thinking through. Same goes with things like cargo securement. Not only do you have to be able to check and make sure that cargo hasn't shifted, you have to be able to do something about it if it does happen. And there's other rules around, rail grade crossings and how you interact with law enforcement, how they do inspections, those things like that, that if you have a human driver present, there's no difference from today. So this is a massive advantage for us. We can deploy nationwide at scale in commercial operations because we fundamentally started with the approach of saying we're going to make humans part of the solution, and we'll use this. We'll have our trucks on the road. We'll be getting millions of miles of experience that we can use to train the autonomous trucks of the future, right? Because you still have both the sensors on in both trucks. That following truck is literally just following the leader. It is reading the situation around it, but it's getting on-road miles. And what you've seen is on-road testing is incredibly valuable because of those edge case, once-in-a-lifetime things that happen out on the road, that any single one of those things is incredibly unlikely to happen, but the likelihood of anything happening is much, much higher. And so if you're looking at all these ways, us and our customers are going to be on the road getting these, having a human driver that handles any crazy thing that happens on the road today and able to handle anything that has to do with federal regulatory compliance. And as we go, so one, I should say that there's a rulemaking out there that the FMCSA is considering. It could have been put out back in March of 2021. They've pushed it back 4 times. They recently just said they pushed it back to November 23rd, 2023, which is right after the election. It is a controversial rule, right? It is one that is strongly opposed by organized labor. And so even if they were to take the next step in November, which, maybe they will, it still takes a year to year and a half to make any additional steps. And an election's coming up. And so if you're looking at the political dynamics of a left of center government moving something that organized labor opposes going into an election, that rulemaking is going to take years. And so you're looking at 2025, 2026 until that rulemaking could even conceivably be finalized if they chose to. And a requirement that organized labor is putting on this rulemaking is that you have to pass a different rulemaking first. And this is a rulemaking from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration around the safe operation of a vehicle. So a safety case framework on how did you prove that you've developed the vehicle safely, that you're putting it on the road safely, that you can improve it over time. That rulemaking was going to take to about 2027, 2028, regardless of who was in there, of which administration was in charge, I should say. But that's fundamentally based on the safety case approach, which is fundamentally how we're deploying our vehicles today and how we're building our vehicles to be compliant in the future. So both of those rulemakings are going to be critical to the deployment of these vehicles over time, but we can legally deploy today because we keep that human driver with the CDL in the mix and in charge of the convoy at all times. So, regulations take time. They're not quick and easy, but by us taking these steps, we can actually provide lessons learned to the entire ecosystem and to our federal regulators so they can improve these rulemakings over time, because we all have a responsibility for the safe operations of commercial motor vehicles. There's no reason to compete on safety when there's lessons learned that can benefit everyone on the roadways. It's not just about us, it's about the safety for all road users, especially the truck drivers on the road, but also those that the truck drivers share the road with.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of great points there. And one that I love is that the ability to gather that data. So essentially, it's almost like being able to future-proof yourself right now, because we're looking at the current landscape of companies trying to do something somewhat similar. The goalpost just keeps getting pushed back in light of different regulations. But when you look at what you're able to do now, can you dive into okay, there are these instances on the road, you're gathering data as you're continuing to drive up efficiency, while a lot of probably your competition is just focusing on a particular area or a particular region.
Yeah.
So that definitely puts you ahead of the curve a little bit while you're already driving up that efficiency. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, you can run the same route back and forth as many times as you want. And we see lots of competitors that are making claims and actually showing that some of the technology is beginning to be available to be able to conduct these, but they can't handle any of these other on-road situations, and their systems are fundamentally fragile because they haven't seen all these edge cases. They haven't been able to gather that data. They're only authorized to run back and forth on some routes with safety drivers in, or safety drivers in the following vehicles that can be responsive just in case. So you can't deploy on a wide-scale way, at least make any money, if you're going to have a safety driver that's just in a car driving behind a truck in case something happens so that they can be there to handle the situation. All you figured out how to do is to add technology to make trucking more expensive. And we can find all sorts of ways to make trucking more expensive. That's not the goal. The goal is to use technology to increase optimization, to increase the fuel efficiency, to lower the cost per mile and the cost per load so that you can get these benefits and you can lower the price of trucking for the benefit of the carriers, give them some more money in their pockets, for the shippers to make trucking less expensive, and for the drivers that can get a bigger piece of the pie, take it home to their families, who they'll see every night. So it's all about using technology to lower the cost, not just finding ways to make it more expensive to truck.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I mean, I got to bring Chetan back into this as well. I mean, we're looking at this game plan, Chetan. We're talking about what's currently going on. And I think this is meaningful stuff. We're talking about being able to drive up that efficiency. We're talking about driving up that efficiency and still collecting data to help to that future deployment of the autonomous vehicles. So Chetan, can you talk about what comes next after this step?
Yeah, great point. So there are a number of steps required in deployment of an autonomous trucking service, especially a turnkey operation like ours, like Locomation's. First, we are working with our customers to re-engineer their operating models so that they can start running their trucks 20 plus hours per day, every day. It's not just one time. It's not just for 2 weeks. It's basically coming up with a blueprint to make it a day-to-day clockwork. This is an essential step in the deployment of AV technology because, as Finch was mentioning, trucks are expensive. AV trucks will be expensive, more expensive, and it will be all about the customer ROI. And we strongly suggest everybody to think in terms of ROI. So we need to make sure that these autonomous assets will be deployed in the most optimal fashion and will be utilized to the utmost extent, so the ROI will be maximized. That's why starting with re-engineering their operating models for our customers is essential. It's an imperative. At the same time, we are validating our autonomous truck technology with extensive testing. And come 23, we expect to complete our customer validation with our existing customers and then put the first commercial autonomous human-guided convoys, ARC systems, into service. So that is, we are extremely excited about this is finally happening, and we can almost touch it. It's at arm's length. That's very exciting. And after that, we will look to scale and deploy our human-guided autonomy systems as wide and as deep as possible. And while continue to learn from real world and make our systems more and more capable and resilient against the edge cases, the variances, the unforeseen situations, all the intricacies that the world is full of. And when one day federal rules allow, in particular the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration rule on the safe integration of automated driving systems equipped commercial motor vehicles, we will fully move into the solo driverless autonomy on freeways with hub-to-hub capability. And then when we have the safety evidence, when we have the performance evidence, when we have extensive data around the capabilities of our system, we will expand into the final phase, move to a dock-to-dock solution that spans both the freeway and the urban surface street last mile driving. So this is how we see the roadmap. That hasn't changed. We are making steady progress on our roadmap, and we still keep our eye on the big prize.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember we chatted, I think it has to be almost a year ago now, or maybe even longer, when we first chatted, and, hearing about Locomation, I was like, okay, this is my first introduction to the company. Don't know much, but I'm loving what I'm hearing. And to hear, after a year that you're still on that same track, that you're still moving forward. This isn't the same case that I hear a lot of the times where I'm looking at, the industry. I'm hearing, and this is going to be a delay, or we're going to push this back. We're still testing this. We're still testing that. So it's great to hear that there is this constant move forward. So you mentioned ARC. Can you tell me about what ARC stands for? What's that acronym?
Oh, yes, we should have probably started with that. ARC stands for Autonomous Relay Convoy.
Gotcha. And so when we're looking at that autonomous relay convoy, that's a part of the data gathering aspect as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is going to be another 1-2 punch. In fact, it's going to be a 1-3 punch. So with the ARC deployed, commercially deployed ARC systems, every mile an ARC convoy drives, our customers make money. We make money, and we learn about real world at vast scale. So this is the most efficient way of actually advancing the technology, because we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know. We need to learn about the real world at a massive scale and at unprecedented scale in order to make sure that whatever we build, we actually have an evidence around its reliability and its safety. So that's why maybe I just invented the term 1-3 punch. So you're all welcome.
And Chetan, this could be you or for Finch, either one. But when I'm looking at the supply chain and the current state of the industry, I mean, we're coming out of a pandemic, supply chain incredibly constrained right now. I mean, when you look at, the amount of capacity. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is, of course, shifts in demand, consumer demand on durable goods, things like that. Can you talk to how this system can really be something that is, really impactful during times where the supply chain continues or starts to even ease? Because one of the first things I think of when I think of like an easing in the supply chain is that efficiency is that much more important, because we're talking about times of boom and growth. Margins are so large, you can make some mistakes. When you have a down industry or times of down period, you have to be efficient.
That's excellent. I'll take that if that's okay. Yeah, that's another very powerful aspect of our overall business value proposition, that it's an evergreen proposition. And we all know trucking is a cyclical market. It goes up. It's a bull market. It's a bear market every 2-3 years. It's inevitable. And at every turn of the market, there are different opportunities and different challenges. So when it's a bull market, everybody's crazy about capacity and they don't care about how much they are actually paying, because it's all about getting the freight from point A to point B. And we are very powerful there because we provide twice the capacity with your asset base. And when it's a bear market, then everybody's all about cost efficiency, they become cost conscious, and it's all about efficiency. And we are very powerful there because while improving the capacity, we are at the same time reducing the operating costs. So you become more competitive. So you win in a bull market, in a bear market. It's like this magical sailboat that you can basically sail regardless of wherever the wind is blowing from.
I love
and if I can jump in there too, I think it also makes sense what we're seeing with how the federal government is trying to handle the supply chain issues as well. When you look at what it means to optimize a route, you see, one, the federal government is moving towards more of a pay the truckers by the hour instead of pay the truckers by the mile approach. And they're using free-flowing data. They actually call it the Flow Data Trust, for how to have common standardized information about where freight is and where the bottlenecks are, especially the bottlenecks with the shippers, right? And what we see is companies that try and optimize their freight routes have much lower detention time with shippers. And that's important because the federal government's going to make you pay your driver by the hour, not by the mile. Every minute that your driver is sitting there waiting for a load is now coming out of your pocket, not just the driver's pocket. And so these federal moves are coming together, and only those that are proactively thinking about this and working towards this are going to be able to take advantage of this market so that they can become the carriers of choice, right? Because the shippers will need them to do that, because otherwise everybody's losing money having to pay for the driver just sitting there. And so not only do you have that, but when you start making sure that the drivers are generating more, you're not having to deal with all the truck driver shortage issues that we've been talking about. There's not a problem getting people on board with the idea of becoming a truck driver. There's a problem getting them to stay as a truck driver. And there's two main reasons. One is because of the depression and loneliness, not getting home. Like, that is a legitimate reason why drivers report wanting to quit the profession. The other is that they make less than they expected to, because they understand what they're supposed to make by mile, but they don't understand how much of their time is being wasted waiting for loads. And it is a huge amount of time. And truckers feel real pain for this and real frustration. This is what drives them out of the industry, not the truck driving job itself. The truck driving job is great. It's the inefficiencies in the bureaucracy that makes them want to leave. And so if we can use this to fix those ahead of time, we get to keep the drivers, and the carriers can become carriers of choices because they're organized enough to take advantage of this before the regulations come in and start costing those that are unprepared huge amounts of money, millions and billions of dollars when you talk about the amount of wasted time for each truck driver per year. I mean, it is a big deal. And so those that are proactively working towards this are going to be the ones that are better able to capture and win the market. We're just here to help them do so.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point when you're talking about those truckers leaving the industry altogether. I mean, when you're looking at the demographics, I mean, a lot of new drivers don't make it past a certain benchmark. And so you just have older drivers staying in a little bit longer, then it starts to age out a little bit. And then you have certain routes that experienced drivers, older drivers just refuse to take altogether. So when you look at this really being put into place, it really kind of makes sense of tying it all together for driving that overall efficiency. I love it. So Finch, Chetan, thank you guys so much. I see right now that there is some chatter going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia, who I think has a few questions, and get kicked off with some of the Q&A going right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. Yes, as Anthony mentioned, now is time for some live Q&A. We've already had a bunch of great questions coming in, but if you haven't already submitted yours, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. We are going to roll through as many as we have time for now. So first question here, how do you position yourself against competitors like Tesla, which already have billions of minutes of self-driving data that they are training their models on? Why is your approach and solution better? And what metrics are you using to compare? Finch, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I think I can start with that, Chetan, if that's okay. So Tesla, of course, they're primarily deploying their light-duty vehicle, so the data is relatively irrelevant to the training of a commercial motor vehicle heavy-duty truck. It's also worth noting that because they have a single camera that they use to do this, they don't have good depth perception. And you're seeing that with their on-road testing now, right? You need to have two cameras that overlap the same way we have two eyes that helps us see the difference of things. They don't have that approach. So their data, in my opinion, is worthless. Maybe it's useful for their own model on light-duty vehicles, but maybe not if you look at the way their on-road beta testing is going. So that's irrelevant. Now, when you look at our approach, of course, we use LiDAR, and that's important because if you're trying to see long distances, LiDAR is a great way to do that. We set up our cameras on mirror pods on the sides of the vehicle, which is the optimal place to be able to position so that you can see the road in front of you and be prepared as far off as possible. Tesla is dallying in the commercial motor vehicle area as well, but, I don't see them as market leaders there. And frankly, I don't see them with market leaders in the light duty vehicles either, based on their approach. They've also changed their sensors over time. They no longer have radar as well. So a lot of their old data is not even useful to them because it's not really relevant to today's systems and placement. Now, Chetan, you're much smarter, so I don't know why I jumped in front of you on that one. But
it's all good. You made great points. I'm going to talk about the other part of it. So it's how much data you can technically collect is one thing. How much data you can afford to collect and store and shuffle around is a whole different decision point. And in my opinion, the most important part is that what do you end up doing with that data? And Tesla's approach of relying on unexplainable black box deep neural networks for an end-to-end system. So I'm going to have a bunch of cameras, whatever pictures I'm seeing on the cameras, a black box will magically turn that into steering, acceleration, and brake commands. And I will have no idea how the black box did that. So that sounds like magical. And if there was a way of putting your magical wand and making that happen, maybe that would have been very cool, but it will still pose significant safety and compliance risks, because if you cannot understand what is happening in your system, how can you claim whether it's safe or not? And if you cannot claim whether it's safe or not, how do you make sure you are not exposing general public to a giant safety risk? So we see that the technical approach Tesla is taking as a significantly flawed approach. And their head of AI just posted on Twitter that he is taking a 4-month-long sabbatical when they are supposed to crack full autonomy sometime this year. I mean, I can't take a weekend off. I'm more like, hey guys, we are launching next year, so let's hurry up. And I can't imagine if someone is actually able to take 4 months off when they are at the cusp of such a breakthrough. So I will put some money on that their approach, they realize that their approach is not the right one. It will take some PR moves and some time for them to publicly admit it. And I'm curious to see how they will reveal that in the end. But again, data on paper, it looks great. Wow, billions of miles. What is actually in that data? What are you able to capture? And what are you doing with that data? These are the important ones. And at Locomation, for the initial human-guided convoying element, our metrics, because that was part of the question, our metrics are more around systems engineering, functional safety, and safety of the intended functionality of a human-guided convoy. It is not about being able to understand every shape of grapefruit out there or every piece of wobbly driver out there. So we have the human driver for handling those. We are about making sure that the underlying foundational autonomy system is undisputably safe. We have evidence around it is safety. So that's how we are measuring our progress right now. And once our convoys are on the road and once we start getting all this data for inching towards completely driverless deployments, then we will start measuring the information content in the data, because you can drive 1 billion miles on I-10 and not learn a thing. Or you can drive 10 miles in where it matters and learn maybe 100 times more than that. It's not the data what's important. It's the information that's hidden in the data. And we will look to follow the metrics that actually quantify information gain with every mile our convoys will drive.
Excellent, Chet. And kind of along the same lines, lots of folks are wanting to know, do you have trial periods and what is the recommended period to get these solid metrics?
So it is, what we do is we usually engage with our fleet partners, and we don't measure it by time, or we don't say that, okay, so let us just come and pull loads for a week or two so you see for yourself. It's not about that, because when the technology is ready, when we have the safety evidence, the operational characteristics are there, you don't need to pull trailers to showcase that. You can showcase technology and its capabilities on public roads, as well as we do a lot of demonstrations on our test track, because in the test track, we can actually demonstrate things that we cannot demonstrate on the public road without safety hazards. So we are focusing on what the system can actually do when things are normal. And especially in the upcoming months, as we get closer and closer to the final validation phase of our technology, we will be increasingly more so demonstrating what the system can do when something goes wrong. And that is actually where it matters. But that aside, the main engagement that we do with our carrier partners is to understand how they are operating today, where the technology will fit, whether it's a good fit for them at all or not, because we want to be mindful of their time and, of course, our time too. And if there is a great fit, what it takes to squeeze every bit of efficiency gain, what needs to change, how can we understand it better by studying their data with them. So we are focusing on the operational backend parts as we are demonstrating the capabilities of autonomy on the side.
Excellent. Next question here, moving in a different direction now. Is platooning now legal in all states? Are you bound by those safe driving distance between vehicle regulations? Finch, I'll let you take this one.
So the answer is yes, we are bound by those. Platooning and following distances are exactly the way we need them in the vast majority of states. There's actually 6 states across the entire country that we would work with on updating theirs. But I mean, that includes states like California, where they said, we're going to seek to update this rule in 2023. We have over 10,000 miles that are being conducted by the UC Berkeley and the California Path Group that will inform this to make sure that we can make this change. So that's an example of like, yeah, technically California, we need to update that. But the state legislature has already said, go do this research, come back to us with a report. They've already done 10,000 miles safely that proven efficiency, proven the safety of these convoys and so on. So then that work just has to finish up. And in 2023, hopefully, unless something crazy happens, they will update that in California too. So just a tiny fraction of the states that we need to update the laws for, follow too closely issues, things like that. So we're in pretty good shape.
Awesome. Next question here. Companies need to renew their fleet every so often. Will Locomation plan an OEM play, or will retrofitting the truck be the approach for some time? Chet, and I'll let you start with this one.
Mm-hmm. Great question. We are not looking to be an OEM ourselves, so we are not building the trucks ourselves. We leave it to our OEM partners who know how to build trucks better than we do. What we are looking to do is to tap into the fleet recycle or renewal cycles of the fleets, and basically retrofit or upfit Locomation technology on the new batch of trucks that they will be getting. And basically tap into that existing workflow and natural cycle to start transforming their fleets and eventually get them to, in some cases, 100% autonomous, in some other cases, maybe 70, 80% autonomous, whatever the applicability inside that fleet is. The main reason for that is we look to squeeze every bit of performance out of a truck using the Locomation system. So these trucks will look to do about 1,000 miles a day, every day, over 200,000 miles a year, maybe 220, 200, and up to 240,000 miles a year. Whereas the industry standard today is at best 100,000 miles, usually less than that. So fleets with our system will actually go through the first part of the truck's usable life way faster than they do today. Because of that, it makes sense to start with a brand new truck put our technology on it, and have the fleets utilize that truck very intensely. And at the end of 2-3 years, the truck is almost midlife in other way. It's at 600, 700,000 miles. And then rinse and repeat, go to the next brand new truck and put our technology on it. This maximizes the ROI. And this fits better with the natural upgrades policies of the fleets.
Excellent. We have time for just about one more question, but we have more that are coming in. So wanted to let the audience know, please do go ahead and continue to submit your questions. We will answer those offline as well. Last question here. How are the hours of service addressed for the second driver? Finch, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, this ended up being a much simpler answer than I initially thought when I started looking into it. Essentially, it's the same way it happens with team drivers today. And as you know, team drivers have been on the road for decades and decades. If you're in the sleeper berth and relieved of all responsibility, which would be the case in the second vehicle, your hours of service are extended. You have that sleeper berth extension that comes into play. And so you're not burning time. You're treated the same way as a team driver. It's just there's 2 automated driving systems and 2 human drivers. So you're able to mix and match better so that both drivers can use as many hours as possible in a day to lead the convoy. So it turned out to be a lot simpler than I expected, and we provided that rationale for compliance to FMCSA a long time ago.
Excellent. As I mentioned, that is about all of the time that we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to listen today. Of course, Locomation for partnering with us on today's presentation. Chetan, Finch, and Anthony, thank you all for sharing your fantastic insights with us. As I mentioned, we'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow for you to view and share on demand. We hope you'll join us again next time for another FreightWaves webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Julia. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thanks, everyone.